Hey there, it's Tash, and I'm here today to do admittedly somewhat belated November wrap up, or like second half of my November wrap up, as I have already filmed my it's November now. What am I doing? What was last month? October. Oh, it's good that I know the months. So I'm here today to do my second half of my October wrap up because I did part one of my wrap up halfway through last month because that was a very rambly video, so you're welcome that it wasn't extra rambly, and there goes the sun. But anyways, so I read 6 books in total this month and 3 books for the part 1, 3 books for the part 2, which worked out really nice. Didn't plan it that way, but I'm not arguing. So I'll just recap maybe briefly. For the first half of last month, I read Dracula, which I gave 2 stars maybe. The Call of Cthulhu and Other Weird Stories, which I gave 3, 4. I don't know what ratings I gave them, but I know that the last book I read was Emma Cline's The Girls, which I gave 5 stars, which I adore, and I still adore, and I need to get on to buying a physical copy because I want a physical copy of that so I can reread. But this month, this half of the month, no. This is why you don't do videos belatedly, because then you keep saying this month and you don't actually mean this month. So for the second half of October, I read 3 books. The first book I read in the second half of October was Poison Study by... One sec. The first book I read for the second half of the month was Poison Study by Maria V. Snyder, and I gave it 4 stars. I think this did the rounds in like popular books a while ago. But basically the general plot is that this girl called Yelena is on death row and she's in prison about to be hanged for a crime that she committed, and basically her punishment is either she can choose between being hanged or being a taste tester for what is essentially like the leader of this country. And obviously being a taste tester for poison is not safe, but she's like, hey, do I want death now, being hanged, or do I want death later by being poisoned? And she's like, I'll take the death later, and then maybe in between now and being poisoned I can figure out how to escape. So yes, she becomes a food taster for poisons and such, and yeah, she's figuring out how to escape I hesitate to say palace, but it's pretty much a palace. Because there was an overhaul a couple of years ago in whatever kingdom she's in, where this guy called the Commander overthrew the prince and took him out and brought a whole bunch of new people in and has a new system in place. Yeah, so she's trying to figure out how to escape that, kind of navigating the politics of who to trust, who not to trust. And also, fun fact, she develops magic powers, so she has to figure out how to deal with that. And also develops a romance with the dude who gave her the choice if she wanted to be executed or taste poison. So it had everything that I just really wanted from a YA book. It was kind of a more adult YA book, and there were some more adult themes, like there was like assault, and it's not graphic, but it's just kind of that more adult content, even though it is still in the YA category. And I gave that 4 stars. And the next book I read, I was looking for something similar to what I just read, even though Poison Study has a sequel, but I wasn't really interested in the sequel. I read the first one and I was like, that's nice, never going to continue this, but I liked it. So I reread another one of her books, which I read for the first time years and years and years ago, and that is Touch of Power, and this one has also done the rounds a while ago because it's not a very new book. But basically the plot is that our main character, Avery, is a healer, and a healer at present is not a very good person to be, seeing as they are being hunted down, as they are being blamed for a plague that swept the nation and took out a whole bunch of people, and everyone thinks that the healers did it. And so she's trying to lay low, but eventually she gets discovered by this guy who's like, yo, come with me. I need you to heal my king so that we can stop the infighting in the kingdom, because a bunch of leaders are trying to be the number one guy of the nation. But that king sort of informally led an inquest against the healers. He was part of the one who really started the hunt for the healers. So she's like, we'll see. And so she has to figure out who to trust, what she's going to do, blah, 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 blah. There's romance, there's action. I liked it. I gave it 3 stars. I didn't like it as much as Poison Study, purely because it felt less fleshed out. The characters felt less fleshed out, even though the pacing was kind of a bit faster. Like, I got it. It didn't hold my attention as much as where Poison Study was slower, but I was more invested. So yes, and then the last book I read, I don't own the first 2 books that I read for the second half of last month, but I own this one. And the last book I read in October is Octavia E. Butler's Fledgling. And Fledgling is a literary sci-fi, if that makes sense, if that's a category. But do not be fooled by the vampire. It is literary. Did I say it was about vampires? I can't remember. Anyway, Fledgling is about vampires, and our main character is a little girl who wakes up one day. She wakes up confused. She wakes up in pain. She doesn't know who she is. She doesn't know what's happened to her, why she has all these wounds all over her. And this isn't really spoiler. It's kind of on the back. Eventually, we figure out together that she is a vampire, and that she is not a very popular vampire, as people have kind of been performing human experimentation on her, and they've given her some more pigmentation. And so our protagonist is a girl of color. Yeah, and so she just has to piece together how to survive as a vampire, how to survive maybe even like ethically as a vampire, what should she be doing? And she finds a couple of humans and teams up with them and is like, hey, let's find out what's happening. So yeah, and she also has to try and figure out what happened to, not only, like she has to figure out what happened to her, who did it, why they did it, and how can she stop them from trying again. Despite the kind of mystery thriller vibe you might get from looking at this book and like reading the blurb and stuff, it's not really. I don't think that the emphasis is really on the characters or even on the plot. The emphasis is more on the themes. Like, it doesn't seem to be a story in and of itself. It seems to be more of a reaction. Obviously, this subverts the vampire, which subverts the vampire, which is usually depicted as a white old male, and now we have a little girl of color. There's a lot of big themes in here about free will, about race, about culture. And I think there's a real focus on relationships in here. And in fact, the vampire, obviously they need to feed on people to survive. But when a vampire feeds on someone, they sort of form not only a physical, but also an emotional connection. And so once you get fed on a couple times by a vampire, your priorities change. You want to make if you're a human being fed on, you want to make your vampire happy, and kind of your whole perspective changes, and your whole life kind of revolves around the vampire. And even the other way around, the vampire very much adores the people that it feeds on and keeps them around. And if one of them dies, it's a whole big drama, and there's emotional, and it's crushing. I don't know, the free will bit kind of freaked me out, because once you get fed on by a vampire, you can't hate the vampire, you can't leave. And I just feel like that's very, I think that's your free will gone. And I'm like, that's stressful. And I think that maybe it is kind of a different take on the Little Prince's what you tame you are responsible for forever, or something. I'm paraphrasing. But I don't know, that still unnerved me. And I don't think it was particularly healthy, especially because it was depicted as a good thing, this relationship, and I'm like, that seems kind of codependent. I don't know if I really like that. So I don't really know what it was trying to say there. Maybe we need to depend on other people and we need to stop with this hyper individualism. But I don't know. There's also a lot of talk about monogamous relationships. They aren't really useful, again, like undermining that super individualism that's kind of rife in our society. And it also talks about how we as people, like through the vampires as a metaphor, need more intercultural understanding, and we need more conversations with people who are different than us, and we need to listen so that we can grow and change and be better and form something better than any of us can ever be separate. So yeah, I do feel like this novel is kind of just a reaction to a lot of the trends and such that Butler obviously saw in contemporary society. I think this was written in 2006, but the underlying main issues are probably the same, I suppose. So yeah, I really liked it. 4 stars. I'm not sure if I agree with a lot of the things that this novel was trying to push. I may have to dwell on that a bit. A lot of them I'm like, yeah, that's just common sense. But like the free will, I find that kind of unnerving. But you know, food for thought. And I think that's what books are meant to do. They're meant to start conversations, introduce new ways of thinking. But yeah, if you're looking for a book that has like a crazy ton of plot and like twists and turns, this isn't really going to do it for you. You find out what happens to our main character like a couple chapters in, and it's not a surprise at all. The characters aren't super developed. I feel like mostly you would read this for the themes, which don't really become clear to the end of the book. But I enjoyed it. It sort of gave me The Girl with All the Gifts kind of vibe. Maybe just because of there's first person narration, and we're following the narrative of a little girl who doesn't know who or what she is, and she kind of goes on a journey to find that. And again, this is about relationships, that was about relationships. So yes, that was my second half of my reading month. And if you have read any of these books or different books, let me know. All right, goodbye.